Fenwick and West, whose wonderful offices you're sitting in, and who provided that wonderful lunch that we just all shared. So thank you to Fenwick and David Hayes. Also, we have 3 other sponsors here today that I want to call out. First of all, Jason Deal with Trinet. And Jason, if you could say just a couple words.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. My name is Jason Deal. I represent Trinet. We're a PEO. Founders often turn to us when they are looking to provide better healthcare benefits for their team, tap into our economies of scale, and allow us to handle the compliance and the HR component so that they could focus on their core revenue generating activities. So if you guys are looking for that type of support, let me know. Happy to chat. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. Next we have Andrew Lang with Vistra. Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks to Nick, Stephen, the whole panel, Jason. Really looking forward to the discussion today, but Jason made my job easy. Pretty much everything he does here in the US for founders, I do internationally for founders. So when you're thinking about opening up in a new country, you need to think about what kind of registration to have, payroll, accounting, tax compliance requirements. I help with all that stuff. So Vistra's got 9,500 employees in about 55 countries. We can service about 110. So anywhere you're looking to open up in the world, I can help you get there. Thanks, Stephen.
Wonderful. Yeah. And last but certainly not least, David Pariso with Comerica Bank.
Hi, everyone. David Pariso, Comerica Bank. I work with our technology life science group, so we support early stage founders for banking needs, venture debt, hopefully to help you guys extend some runway. So appreciate us being able to co-sponsor this and hope everyone enjoys the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So if you need banking, PEO or employee services, compliance services, either here in the US or abroad, definitely speak to Jason and Andrew. And now I want to introduce our MC today, moderator. Nick Larson is with Silicon Zombies, and you see him right there. Advantery has done a few events with Silicon Zombies now, and Nick is an amazing moderator. He's done 100 zillion webinars and events like this. This, of course, will be the best one. Seriously, it is going to be an amazing conversation we have today. I'm delighted to be able to introduce 2 of my partners, as well as I'll start with David Hayes at Fenwick. David and I have known each other for 25 plus years, something like that. And David's one of the longest tenured partners here at Fenwick, and actually ran the IP group for many years until they implemented term limits and he termed out, but he's still on the executive committee. He's the man here at Fenwick for intellectual property, and we are delighted to have him on the panel today. We've also got next to him one of my partners, Shmuel Silverman. Shmuel runs Advantery's IP practice, and clearly much bigger brain. All of these guys have much bigger brain than I do, and Shmuel is a remarkable inventor. He's not a patent attorney or IP attorney. He is an inventor, and you're going to hear some great thoughts from him today. And we've got my partner, Tim Kapp, who runs our AI practice. And so you've got an AI expert and 2 IP experts. So as Tim said to me before I came up here, he's got the easy job. He's going to ask all the fun, interesting questions, and Shmuel and David have to try to figure out how to answer them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick. Thank you, Nick, for being here today, and thank you, Silicon Zombies and the entire team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we say, we bring you the best brains from the Bay, and you say, and beyond. Okay, ready? We're going to do that in a second. Welcome to Silicon Zombies, where we rinse, AI version of tech with the best brains from here and beyond. All right, we're so excited to be here with you today. We've got Dr. Tim, Shmuel, and David. Some delicious brains. We're going to be discovering a little bit about intellectual property in the age of AI. It's a moving target. Things are changing so quickly. So we're very fortunate to have some fantastic experts here today. We did do some quick introductions, so thank you, Henry and Stephen, for that. In fact, we could probably skip those introductions and go straight to the quick kickoff. So, Dr. Tim, do you want to start with some quick slides for us here?
Sure.
All right.
So, is that on? I'm going to stand. I can't seem to speak unless I'm a little more animated, so we're going to have some fun today. Stephen said I get to kick this off, so I'm the luckiest one on the panel today because I get to throw the firecrackers out and see what happens. Let's go into this. So I love Wayne Gretzky's quote about, you've probably all heard it, I'm not going to show it here. You've probably all heard it about, you want to look where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. And so I hope that's what we're doing. With AI, this is the first instruction I give everyone is, you've got to look where we're going, not where it's been or even where it is right now, because it is moving so quickly. If you aren't preparing 3, 4, 5 years in the future, which you're going to see in just a second, you're going to fall behind. I've never seen a technology move this quickly. And I've been involved in technology for 20, 30 years now. So I want to frame this first of all and talk about why is this even an issue? I mean, is IP and AI, that intersection there, really that interesting? So I'm going to show you a few charts very quickly. So this is just a chart showing the volume and share of AI-related public patents. So it's been increasing steadily since 2000 and 2012. We got a big hit with some new legislation that went in place. This chart, I believe, only goes to 2020. In 2023, we just hit 2024, we just hit 18. And I think 23, we hit 18%. I think we're going to be over 20% of all patents being filed in the US, including some form of AI reference as part of the patent. Between 2014 and 2023, we had over 50,000 patents for generative AI alone. We just heard this in the last couple of weeks. Google announced publicly at their earnings conference that they are now putting their IP, their code, almost 25% of their code is AI generated. When I told that to my team, they called them amateurs. They said, we're above 50% in my team right now. And that's going to be very common. I think they're probably above 25% as well. They're probably being very conservative. But it's going that direction very quickly. IP is being generated by AI at an alarming rate. We'll skip that one. It's happening in books. It's happening in movies. And this is the big one. So if you want to know how big this is, does IP really matter? Consider this. Over the last few years, the estimates of the AI's impact on the global economy has gone from 7 trillion up to, the last one was by IDC at $19.9 trillion. That's the estimated impact of just AI on global GDP. So to put that in perspective, that's the same size as Japan and Germany and India and the UK and South Korea, all coming online in the next 5 years, by 2030, okay? It will account by 2030 for 3.5% of all GDP. So this is a big deal. Who owns that property? Who owns the intellectual goods, the code, the systems being used to generate that, and the content or code or whatever it might be, media that is generated from that? So a very big issue. So we're going to step back for a second. I want to give you a simple, I say simple. I'm going to give you a simple test here. This is actually a test for David, I think. On the left here, we have Andy. Andy is a profoundly gifted young woman. She's 7 years old. She reads at a college level. She's doing math at a college level. But because of her intelligence, she also has severe anxieties. She has the intelligence of an adult. She does not have the emotional capability of adults. So she suffers from panic attacks and severe anxiety. So I was speaking with Andy's mother, And she was telling me this. I said, I have a solution. Let's write a book together. So Andy and I wrote a book together, sort of. And this is how it worked. I spent a lot of time doing meditation. And so I was very familiar with Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche and his ideas on meditation. I was listening to one of his podcasts one day where he talked about when he was 7 years old, he had the same problem with panic, okay? That's how he got into meditation. So I took that episode, threw it into an AI. And then I remembered Tara Brach, who retold the story of a well-known traditional Buddhist story about Buddha inviting Mara to tea, I think is the title of the story. And so I took her story, her retelling of that story, and threw it in an AI. And then I took Kate DiCamillo, who some of you are familiar with. She is a great author for girls about the age of 7 or 8. So I didn't take her works. I didn't want to violate any of her copyrights. We'll see if I did. I took some of her works and asked and have a prompt that said, go through this and help me understand her timing. How many words does she use? How does that alternate? What's kind of the tone of the work? What general words does she use? So it's a stylistic reference. Okay, and I threw it in. Now this isn't a regular AI. I'm not throwing this into some LLM or something. It's something that I built, and I spent quite a good amount of time building. It's a multi-agent system that actually has feedback loops. It has self-check loops. So it has lots of things in there. I spent a lot of time building this. Not the code. The code is probably 90% AI. But the prompts and the things and the tests and things that it goes through. So it's probably 20 steps, 20 separate agents that are pulling this all together. And I could use this for any book I wanted. So here's my question. Who owns, oh, sorry, I didn't even give you the punchline here. I threw that all in, and it generated a book that's 13 chapters in a single shot, 13 chapters, 3,000 word. It passes all AI checks that I can check, that I've used. And it's actually a pretty compelling book. It has if you read it, you would not see any references to any of these individuals or necessarily be able to tell if there was any influence other than I used Yongey's title, Panic is My Friend. That's the title of the book. The pictures in it were all generated using Andy as the influence. And I even had multi-character references. So if any of you tried this, it's very hard to get consistent characters. So we built a system that constantly checks those and makes sure that you have a similar character look and feel throughout. So very complex AI. And the question, like I said, is who owns that? Who has rights to that? Who has claim on that book if I were to ever publish it? Now, right now it's between me and Andy, so I don't think we violated anything. It's just for fun. But who would have claim on it if I were to put that on Amazon? Because I could today. Under Amazon guidelines today, I would actually qualify to be published. So that's a simple way, I hope, of illustrating how complex these issues are. So I'm going to very quickly introduce 6 issues here, I think, and I just think about these issues, and then we'll make the rest of the panel answer these. So the first question, like I said, is who owns AI created by IP? Okay, who owns the creative works, the music, the art, the software? And there is an ongoing debate. Now, the Patent Office has published some their ideas on this. But the question is it the user owner? Do I own this because I spent a lot of time building that model? Or at least do I have some claim on it? Do those authors whose data I used, whose IP I used clearly to put in that, have claim on it, even if you can't tell that it was their IP? The patent trade officer said, well, one of the things to determine whether it is ownable IP is whether there's significant human contribution. Okay, but what does that mean? Does it mean I approved something? Does it mean I edited something after it was written? Does it mean I wrote something and then had the AI clean it up? So I'm not sure we know, and David will tell us, what significant even means. Are copyrights, patents, and trade secrets treated similarly? It turns out they are not. Trade secrets are treated very differently than patents and copyrights. Who owns the data? Again, who owns the contributor? If I used contributor work, who owns that? We've got several lawsuits happening right now. How patentable are these models? It turns out a generic neural network, for example, is not a patentable entity. Okay, generic algorithms and things like neural networks aren't. But if I were to just put a unique hidden layer in that algorithm, or if I were to solve a particular problem with that algorithm that no one else has solved, maybe it is patentable. And then what's AI's role in IP enforcement? So this is a great one. Patent Office has fully embraced LLMs, and they're trying to come out with tools now that will actually help inventors to determine if something is patentable or determine if it will probably meet the standards. So they're doing some great work there. And then here's some of the stuff on the horizon. We've got new forms of licensing. Do we need, because of all of this, think through again through that book example, do we need to come up with new forms of licensing that we really haven't imagined before? Do we need to say, how much, do we need to attempt to measure how much human influence was there and thereby assign rights according to that? Do I need to come up with a concept of collaborative rights for people that influence something? Things that we really haven't done before. Then we've got AI and trade secrets. So with trade secrets, you just want to keep your trade secret secret. But at the same time, we have tremendous pressure in our industry right now to be transparent about our models. Those two are not compatible. You're either transparent or you hide it. And I don't know what the correct balance is. Global IP standards are fascinating right now. We do not have uniform standards. In the US, AI cannot own its own content. It has to be a human. Okay, that technically is not true in every country. I asked AI to figure out how to get around whether it could own its own content, and it gave me 8 different ways to get around that going through different countries and all different kinds of paths to figure out how it could own its own content. Wouldn't that be fascinating? And AI incorporates itself and then owns its own content. Again, in the US, you can't do that, but so global IP standards are very interesting. And then finally, AI in litigation is another one. So these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about right now. It's fascinating to me that I was telling Stephen earlier, it's fascinating to me that in 1970, I remember reading a book, 1970, 1980, it was Ray Bradbury book about whether robots or AIs actually can own things. Do they have rights? Things like that. And I thought, we'll never see this in our lifetime. We're having these discussions now. And so it's absolutely fascinating that we're suddenly having these just crazy discussions that were science fiction just a few short years ago. So I'm going to turn it over to
Shmuel, who's got over 100 patents. And
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I speak softly. If you don't hear me, just tell me. So let's start. What I do for Advantari and with a lot of clients is inventing for those clients. I usually ask clients, where's the money? Why do you want a patent? Where does it go? And what does it make sense? What are you trying to protect? As we move through this process, we go and invent and create patents for them. So my problem is the inventor's problem. I want to be truthful with the USPTO and with all the other jurisdictions. I want to make sure that when we create something, we can present it appropriately. And when it comes to litigation, we can protect it appropriately. So let's start with the generic problem. And this is kind of like being human. I read a lot. I read, 5 to 10 different papers a day because I want to make sure that I am very well versed in all the technology out there. I can't invent everything. I want to see what other people are thinking, etc. If you think about it, there are so many papers in the world being created every second. Now, what I have here is just in one area. Think about all the different verticals, all the different areas, creating all these papers. People are inventing and creating, and all this tons of information comes up to the surface. And we as users or people are supposed to be knowledgeable about them if we want to create and invent. creation and invention comes from multiple directions. We do not just invent because we understand only one subject matter very well. In many cases, it's multiple subject matters that trigger our understanding and ideas of how to change and how to create something new. And I'll talk about it even more later. So my thesis is that there are no more inventions in the world that do not use an AI as a participant, as another inventor in the process. And currently, we cannot mark a non-human on a patent and claim that non-human as an inventor. If we do that, I believe we don't get a patent. We're being rejected immediately. That's an issue. So we can go into a little bit more detail and I'll kind of like explain where I'm coming from. So the power of the machine. I would like the machine to analyze things for me and find solutions. I always wanted the machine to find solutions. So even though I can create the code, the search for the solution in the space, the code found it, but I've created it. I wrote those lines of code myself. And I can feel ownership over that specific search. When it comes to an AI, it's kind of like a little bit different. So here is a sea, we call it an ocean of data, and we throw an LLM on top of it. We make sure that some of the information in this data is being churned appropriately and being presented appropriately using vectors or other things, other tools that we have, or create our own machine learning, in here does. And once we are done, which is kind of like simple steps, most of this code we don't even write. I mean, an LLM will write it for us. The LLM does the search and comes with conclusion. Whose conclusions is it? Are they mine? Are these my conclusion? Have I created those conclusions? I mean, I just threw an LLM in and it came back and said, you do X, Y, Z, this is how it's going to work. And of course, if it's in biotech, I will go and test it. So I'll do X, Y, Z and try it in the lab and see that it works. And say, oh, it's worked. It's still not mine. It's not my discovery. In fact, it could be almost 100% an AI discovery. I'm working with one of my clients, and one of the problems is, this is in physics, not in bio. When you build wind turbines, those large wings who propel themselves at about 400 kilometers per hour, they have vibrations in them, and those vibrations can cause basically a lot of damage to the wing itself, and the wing can break. There are some cases where you can't even put this tower in the place that you're trying to put it because of those issues. So when we think about the material and the structure and design of that specific wing, we can definitely develop, and we are trying and working on developing all sorts of simulations to figure out, can we structure the wing a little bit different, put not weights, but some concentration of material in different locations on the wing itself relative to its target location in the world, winds and whatever other questions there, and through the simulation figure out a good ideal structure for that location that will minimize the vibration. It's not me. I mean, I'm just posing the question. It's like, a great idea is not an invention. Ideas are just ideas. To make them invention, you make them practical. They need to actually work. So if I'm asking a search engine to figure out the best way for it to work without me even writing a single line of code, who owns that? Am I the inventor or that search engine? I've been kind of like browsing the web a little bit and look at what Sarah is. She's a professor for stem cell, and what she's describing her work in her world and how she does research. We are today heavily weighted. Our research is heavily sitting and heavily based on AIs. I'm concerned that my job as an inventor is going to go away, meaning I will not be able to protect my inventions anymore, nor they will be my inventions as I further and further leverage AI in my process. So kind of like I invite all of you to ask me questions anytime. I invent in multiple fields, so just ask a question and ask me, can you actually simulate that?
Because there are things that we can't simulate, many things we can. And anything that we can simulate, we should expect an LLM to be able to simulate it in the very near future for us. And at that point, who's the inventor? Thank you. And I'll go back to David, and David is our IP expert.
As David gets started, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end, so please start coming up with some ideas, and then we'll make sure to have some time for that later as well.
So of the three of us up here, I'm the lawyer. And I went last, so that either means I'm the best, or it means they stuck me last because the real people got to go first. I'd like to gauge the audience briefly. You're going to raise your hand in one of three categories. I've got a fourth one that's a surprise at the end. You're either a technical person, engineer, computer programmer, you're a business person, you're a lawyer. Okay, just raise your hand. Technical. Okay, business. Lawyer. Okay. If you're a dog, raise your paw. Okay, no dogs. I'm going to talk about copyright. I also have some patents and slides on patents, but I'm not going to start those. We may look at them later. Tim, the AI that generated that 3,000 word book, it came out. Did you do any modifications to it after that?
The book?
Yeah. It's exactly the way the AI created it. Okay. So there are many things that are copyrightable. Virtually many forms of creativity that humans can create can be the subject of copyright. It can be text, can be music, can be audiovisual works like a movie, can be computer program code, artwork, sculptures. Just about everything that enriches our lives is potentially copyrightable, the subject matter. Unfortunately, the answer to your question is who owns that book? Today, in the US, the Copyright Office would say nobody. And I'm going to explain to you why. Okay, you may have seen this picture of this monkey before, and I'm going to tell you what his significance is. Back in 1884, there was a famous US Supreme Court decision that said to qualify as a work of authorship, a work must be created by a human being. And that's been the law in the United States since 1884 at least. And this monkey was involved in a very well-known lawsuit. Slater was a photographer, and he did a lot of wildlife photography. And he went to Indonesia and studied macaque monkeys. And he had developed a relationship with a bunch of monkeys. And he set up a camera on a tripod, and he put a little cable on it with a button on the end that you could push the button and take a picture of yourself. And he wanted to see if the monkeys would ever go up there and take a picture of themselves. And this particular macaque, he named Naruto, one day walked up to the camera, looked at it, smiled, and pushed the button. And this is what came out. And then there was Slater. There were a whole bunch of pictures that these monkeys took, and Slater published them online. And the PETA, P-E-T-A, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, intervened and said that he should not have a copyright in that photo. Why? Because he didn't take the photo. The monkey pushed the button. And we get copyrights in our photographs when we go to the edge of the Grand Canyon, size it up, and push the button. The monkey pushed the button. So the question was, hey, Slater, you're an infringer because Naruto actually owns the copyright in that photo. District Court said, no, that's wrong. Going back to the Supreme Court, you got to be a human being, and monkey is an animal. It's not a human being. Although sometimes the line between those two is not so clear. And goes up to the Ninth Circuit and they affirm an animal cannot hold copyright. Just for your interest, one of the other macaques took a full body selfie that looks like this. You can see him pushing the button. And here's a couple other pictures that Naruto took of himself or herself. Alas, no copyright to Naruto. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of some works that have gone to the Copyright Office and people have tried to get a copyright registration. Now, the way the law works is you can hold a copyright as soon as you create a work of authorship and fix it in a tangible medium of expression. But you have to get a registration of that copyright in order to enforce those rights. So what the Copyright Office says about whether you can have a registration or not is a very important element in whether we're going to have copyright protection for works of authorship generated in whole or in part by AI, even with a human on the other end of the AI, not a monkey. So the first one was a recent entrance to paradise. And that looked like this. And it was a train track going into a tunnel. And this was generated entirely by AI. By Dr. Thaler, who had written the AI that generated this. And he tried to register with the Copyright Office, and they said no. It's purely AI generated, no human input. He didn't argue that he had any human input, although he wrote the AI. And the Copyright Office said no. So it went into court, went into the federal trial court. Thaler sued the Register of Copyrights, Shira Perlmutter, and said, you got to register my copyright. The court said human authorship is the bedrock requirement of copyright. Copyright law has never stretched so far as to protect works generated by new forms of technology operating absent any guiding human hand. And since intellectual property, the Copyright Clause says, is intended to promote the progress of useful arts, that's the clause in the Constitution, non-human actors don't need an incentive to create copyrighted works like humans do. And so we're not going to register this work. It was created by a machine. Unfortunately, your book was created by a machine. Sorry, Tim. Currently on appeal in the Federal Court of Appeals in DC, the oral arguments were in September of this year. Another one came up. Yes.
Can I just?
Peter, would you grab the mic because we're recording and we've got to. By the way, this is Peter Manel, who's a professor of intellectual property at Berkeley Law.
Just a guest here, but he did say he did 20 prompts, or it sounded like prompts. So I think that's a little beyond your hypotheticals.
But we're gonna see some works that had several hundred prompts, and it didn't make a difference.
Wow, interesting. Well, I mean, I think it's on appeal, but I'm
talking about at the Copyright Office.
Yeah, but did the Copyright Office rule out the human prompting? I thought it's still open, that Thaler was trying to sort of just get.
He changed his arguments on appeal. He did.
Thanks.
And he was taken to task for that. Suddenly he had done prompting when he got to appeal. Wasn't in the trial court. Okay, Zarya of the Dawn was a work that was created by a woman named Kashtanova. And she used AI to generate a character for a comic book that she wrote. And this is the character on the left-hand side that was the protagonist for the comic book. And she used AI to generate a lot of the artwork, essentially all of the artwork in the frames of the comic book. But she wrote the text, what the people were saying in the frames. She went to the Copyright Office. Until they figured out that AI was involved, they gave her a registration. And then they learned through public sources that she had used AI, and they revoked the registration. and reissued it and said, we'll give you a registration, but it covers the sequence of the images, the ordering of them that you elected, and the text that you wrote, but not the individual images. Now, she had, just to go back, she had created these images using over 1,000 prompts. And she had described what she was looking for, and she was looking for a human-like but surreal, several characteristics of this character. And she kept putting prompts in until the AI gave her something. She said, that's what I was looking for. But that did not make her an author, according to the Copyright Office. More than 1,000 prompts. Next one came along. This title in French means space opera theater. And this particular artist used AI to create the image on the left by Midjourney. That's what it came out looking like. The work on the right is, he then took the Midjourney image and he increased the resolution, and then he used Photoshop to doctor what Midjourney created. And here's a blow up of what he created. So if you take a look at the center there and all of the detail around the center. There was none of that in the Midjourney output. Now take a look on the right-hand side and you will see one figure on the right. You'll notice that all of the heads of the other figures are surreal. They're not exactly human heads. In his image, he made all of the heads look like real humans. They are people from the Victorian era. And you'll see he added another character on the right-hand side back in the back there. Now on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a person standing next to what looks like a table or something. Very little detail other than just maybe a fireplace or something in the background. And he sort of redid all of the left-hand side with all this additional detail that sort of continues over from the rest of the roof, okay? This actually won the Colorado State Fair's 2022 annual art competition. And as I said, it depicts Victorian performers looking out from the stage toward an otherworldly portal in the surreal synthesis of past and future, is the way he described his artwork. He used 624 prompting sessions to get what he wanted. Required 114.4 hours of prompting until he thought that Midjourney image was okay to work from. And then he added these additional elements with Photoshop and upscaled the resolution using gigapixel AI. Copyright Office rejected the registration, said that upscaling and the Photoshop tweaks were insufficient human authorship. Copyright Office, and this is a really important point, relied on Midjourney's website statement that, quote, Midjourney does not interpret prompts as specific instructions to create a particular expressive result. Because Midjourney does not understand grammar, sentence structure, or words like humans, which I think is actually a false factual statement. It does understand sentence structure and grammar. In fact, that's the purpose of training a textual AI. But in any event, Midjourney creates images, not text. And the Copyright Office thinks that those prompts you're putting in are not dictating what comes out. Okay? I don't happen to agree with that. If I go to AI, if I go to Midjourney and I put in a prompt cat on a hot tin roof, I'm not going to get a cow on a motorcycle as the output. When I get something that has a cat and there's some kind of building with a tin roof. And if I continue to prompt it and I tell it I want it to be a farm building with a tin roof and blah, 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 the images that are going to come out are going to be influenced by those prompts. But that is not the Copyright Office's position. The artist recently filed suit in Colorado Federal District Court to reverse that decision. And it's in the early stages. Here's another one, a work called, I guess you say it's Surrealist. And there was a photographer named Sonny. He took the photograph on the left. He used a piece of AI that allowed you to put in an input and then something that you wanted the output to be in the style of. So his idea was take my photograph and put it in the style of Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. And here's what the AI generated. Okay. You will notice, see the light in the center, the sun, and you see the building top underneath it. And on the left-hand side, you see sort of a platform on top of the building. All of those were in his original photograph, okay? And so the AI left those more or less in place and then added the Starry Night as the background. He tried to register that with the Copyright Office. He argued, I have enough human authorship based on three things. First is my photo that went in as input. I took that, that's copyrightable. I chose Starry Night as the style that I wanted in the output, and it came out with Starry Night, didn't come out with something random. And I put in a numerical value to the AI that would determine the strength of the style transfer. I could have it be very strong, look a whole lot like Van Gogh, or not very strong, and maybe just a couple little stars would show up, but it wouldn't be this whole elaborate blue. He made one mistake though. He listed AI as a co-author. Not what I would have recommended. Copyright Office rejected the registration. It said AI, not Sani, controlled what elements of the input and the style image would appear in the output. The specification of the degree of transfer didn't count. The AI output is, quote, a function of how the model works in the images it was trained on, not specific contributions or instructions we received from Sani. I have a hard time understanding how you could say that when he's picked the inputs, he's picked the amount of style transfer, he's picked the style he wanted, that had no influence on the output. He didn't know exactly what the thing was going to look like, but he certainly had influence on what it came out looking like. But for the current Copyright Office, that is not enough. Here is their guidance for works containing AI material as of March 2023. This may change. President Biden, as you know, issued an executive order back summer, late spring, I think, requiring all federal agencies to promulgate certain policies about AI and the use of it. And the Copyright Office has said before the end of the year, they will update this guidance on when AI-generated works are registrable. So this is not necessarily the final word, but as of March, this is what they said. They will ask whether the work is basically one of human authorship, with the computer merely being an assisting instrument, or whether the literary, artistic, or musical expression, that's the copyrightable authorship, were actually conceived and executed not by man, but by a machine. So they have this sort of dichotomy that's one or the other and not conceived by both man and machine, which is different from the patent regulations. That significant contribution that you referenced, Tim, that's actually comes from the Patent Office, not the Copyright Office. But they are willing to issue patents if an invention has element A generated by AI, element B created by the human, contributed by the human. They won't let you list AI as the inventor, but they will issue a patent on the combination with the human listed as the inventor. Copyright Office so far is not really much looking at it like that, as you can have A and B and the combination can be copyrightable. Sorry, this skipped forward. So if a work is determined to have been created solely by a machine, won't be registered. And again, they reiterate their understanding of AI based on the office's understanding of the generative AI technologies currently available. And again, most of these examples are all in artwork, not in text. But they take a very similar approach with text. Users do not exercise ultimate creative control over how such systems interpret prompts and generate material. You can't tell what you're going to get out exactly, and therefore the human did not dictate what came out. Not entirely, but often substantially. If a user modified material generated by AI to a sufficient degree, the office will grant registration of the human authored aspects of the work, but the use of the tools must be disclosed, and the AI generated portions must be disclaimed in order for them to issue the registration. So if Castanova had done that when she first submitted Zarya of the Dawn and said, I used AI tools, it generated the images, I did the text, I did the sequencing, I'm not claiming the AI portion, she would have given up on Zarya, the main character, they would have registered. And that's ultimately what they did do. And so now they're requiring the registrant to state that you've used AI and to disclaim anything created by the AI. It's a tricky thing to do when it's all mixed up. I've had many clients ask me, how do you do that? Other countries, however, do grant copyrights in AI-generated works. One of them is China. 2023, a Beijing internet court found an image generated by Stable Diffusion copyrightable because the user undertook an iterative process in which he modified and refined the prompts until the model output was consistent with his creative vision. That describes to a T what Castanova did with Zarya. So in China, you'd get a copyright. The UK Copyright Designs and Patents Act extends copyright protection to computer-generated works and provides the author of the work as the person by whom the arrangements necessary for the creation of the work are undertaken. So there's a little uncertainty about what necessary arrangements means. Does that mean who operated the IA, who put the prompts in iteratively? Something else? Not fully fleshed out in British law at this point. So my recommendation is, if you're using AI tools, and we've been looking at sort of visual stuff, but tons of my clients use code generators to generate software code. I recommend that you think about documenting how the AI tools were employed, and especially in artistic works, the specific prompts you put in there. Because when it gets to court, if you can show the 600 prompts that you had to use in order to get Zarya to look like what you wanted her to look like, that could help you quite a bit. So I think it'd be useful to keep track of that. I'm not going to go through all the rest of these slides. I do want to give you a sense, though, where some of the hot litigation issues are. There's a whole bunch of litigation going on right now with defendants who trained their models, large language models, on copyrighted data without a license to make the copies of the data that they fed into the model. So there's a couple of claims you can make. One is direct copyright infringement. You made the copies to use for training. And some of the plaintiffs are arguing that the training data gets stored in the model, that it's basically, it's been transformed into probabilities, but because you can get it back out with the correct prompts, it has to be somehow stored in the model. It's not in traditional ASCII or, it's not just a direct digitization of the text, but if you can get it back, it's stored in the model. So if you're distributing copies of the model, not just in the cloud, their theory is every time you distribute the model, you're distributing the training data because it's stored in the model. There are also indirect copyright infringement theories. There's a couple of them. One known as contributory infringement, if you have knowledge of the infringement and you make a substantial contribution to it, or inducement, where you encourage that use, and it produces substantially similar output. That is a theory on which some plaintiffs are trying to hold the creator of the model responsible for the output generated by the user. Okay? Now you could argue the user's the direct infringer, but the model holder is responsible. I will not do the fair use defense now, but that's sort of the state of the art. The last thing I would say is on this, I think sometimes we get lost in the fact that AI is involved in this, and it sort of blinds us to the fundamental principles. Suppose I'm Jackson Pollock, and I line a canvas up on the wall, and I take some paint, and I just sling it over there. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's done, but it's going to be interesting, and I'm interested in a random splatter of paint. That's my artistic conception. If I take that to the Copyright Office, there's no question they would register. Is that because the human touched the brush? Okay, what if I take a wheel and I put the paints on, and I choose the colors of the paints, and I choose whether they're more on the left side, more on the right, push the button, the wheel spins around, and it flings the paint. No human arm touched the brush. Is it now not copyrightable? Those are the kinds of distinctions that I think even in the traditional world, that if you analogize to, you have to wonder whether we're drawing these lines with AI or not AI, yes or no, black and white. Just, I wonder whether they're correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all you gentlemen. That was a pretty cute monkey who took that selfie. I wonder if he had legal representation. Maybe Wilson's on CNN or something. I don't know. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Great. So when we think of, thank you, gentlemen, for setting the stage as well. When we think of infringement and the changing landscape, to me, it really comes back to ownership. And Tim, as a professor who's teaching artificial intelligence and machine learning, I'm curious, are there models to understand how much creativity has been implemented into a particular given work? Otherwise, to David's point, it can be kind of a tricky question to understand true ownership. How are you thinking about this? How are your students thinking about this?
I don't.
So this is a fascinating question to me, and I don't know that I have an answer. So the reason I did this book idea is because copyright is very important in my particular family. My father's a professional artist. My aunt's a well-known musician. And I'm always curious because I've seen since I was a kid how artwork is actually created. You know, I see artists that are taking photos and taking inputs from all kinds of different sources and using it as their own influence to create their own works. That's how art has always worked. And so I don't know that it's impossible. I like David's idea of going back and looking at what we've always done as humans. I don't know that you can look at a piece of artwork and see if it's influenced by different artists. You can look at it, you can listen to music and see if, David Bowie's drum line is in someone else's piece of music. So we've always had that kind of issue. I don't know of models that do this very well, to be honest. We can look at certain texts, we can find patterns, but to be honest, it's very difficult. And it's probabilistic, meaning we can't tell, yes, it was for sure, or no, it was not for sure influenced by certain things. We can only assign it probabilities.
Shmuel, did you want to talk about that?
Most of these models are training themselves. So we go to a training cycle, and if I ask the model a specific question, based on the data being generated, assuming also I'm providing my own data into it, I'm always going to learn something from it. So the next time, basically, there is a good chance that when I repeat the same prompt, I do not get the same answer. When you look at Midjourney, for example, I can write the same word twice, and I will get a different answer. So it's not like you've got a paintbrush and a brush, and you just write a letter or change something as an artist. It's not that you take a consistent input and your artistic view go and change it. We are looking at the machine that we've trained and continuously trained itself and get its own feedback. So when the Copyright Office come and say, hey, it's not really your creation. Even though you provided a prompt, we're not sure it's really yours. Actually have something behind it. So it's really hard to, it's almost, when you have a machine as part, a smart machine, as part of creativity, it's not necessarily that you're the creator. And I like to maintain it for, patents as well, even though we have a little bit more leeway on patents. Still, my co-creator was a machine. And there are things that the machine finds that I didn't even think to prompt it for. And I got those results. And then I take those results to the USP2 and say, hey, my patent. Well, did you really invent it? And I don't know.
When we think of, David, this is for you. When you mentioned that the Copyright Office, that they mentioned that the model didn't understand the grammar or the syntax or the language structure. I mean, I'm curious, what's the difference between true comprehension and mimicking? And like, how are you thinking about this as you advise your clients? Because you're advising several dozen AI startups.
So understanding is a loaded word in an AI context because it's an anthropomorphization, right? No, I don't think an AI model understands grammar in the sense that a child does when they hear it over and over and then they mimic it. I think what the model understands is, if I have this sequence of words, what's the probability the next word in the words in the following sequence are something else? So that's sort of a mapping of facts in a way. And the Copyright Office is probably true that it doesn't read, wouldn't read your novel and say, oh, that's about a girl that, was afraid and had anxiety and was helped by this and that. No, it certainly doesn't do that. But to say that it's a random process unrelated to its prompt that comes in, I think is not correct. Not because it's a brain and understands the prompt substantively, but because the human knows that the prompt will influence this thing that's been trained in a certain way to come out with a cat on top of a tin roof instead of a cow on top of a donkey, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of parallels to, if we think of training and learning, but the CEO, the government isn't known for being traditionally very innovative or focused on what's coming next. In fact, it's almost kind of been like a lagging indicator of sorts. So maybe some of these government organizations or politicians, they themselves should go through some kind of training. Maybe they should go to Dr. Tim's class. What are the thoughts here on the panel about how to empower our legislators to make the best decisions because it impacts us at such a great scale? Tim, please.
Well, to be honest, to their credit, the Biden administration has done a fantastic job of reaching out to us. So I spent the last 2 summers actually responding to a lot of requests for information, and as have a number of my colleagues. They've done a fantastic job. Even the Patent Office, if you go read the director's blog, discusses how much they're reaching out and trying to engage the community and understand. So most of the government agencies, to my surprise, have been extremely innovative on this, and they are continuing to do so, trying to understand exactly how it works. Now, whether senators or the Congress is doing the same, I've had a couple senators reach out. I think they wanted, well, I shouldn't say this.
We are live.
Well, okay, we aren't live. No, we've had senators and congressmen reach out as well. I don't think they're engaged to the extent that the actual administration and the government agencies are, but the agencies are very keen on educating themselves right now.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I bring it up is everybody knows that when Mark Zuckerberg was on trial, one of the senators had asked how Facebook makes money. He's like, well, we sell ads. It was kind of like basic information. But it's interesting because we know that documentation is important as we're coding. But to David's point, maybe documentation as we're creating to be able to use that is something as a foundation to protect yourself later could be an interesting product as well. Just recently, Mark Andreessen. So we all know that it's not legal to kind of manipulate the market, of course. But Mark Andreessen just gave a $50,000 grant to a gentleman who created a model, and the model created a meme coin. Are you familiar with these, like Doge, for example? And what that ended up doing, it was trained on social media and large swaths of the internet. But it started creating memes around the coin, and within a week, that coin's worth over $300 million. Now, you can't do this if you're an individual, but it becomes something of a fuzzy area. So, Shmuel, how are you thinking about where you had the quote of Wayne Gretzky, right? Or no, that was Tim Skate where the puck is going. How are you guys thinking about this? Shmuel, please. It's a curveball, I know. That's okay.
It's hard for me to respond to this specific question. I can be a little bit more generalized. Both for this panel and in general in life right now, as I look at what the AI brings, and especially where there is a lot of, I call it self-training. So when you have an AI model that is completely static, meaning the weights and what comes in and comes out and it never changes, I treat it like you treat a pen. I can use it to do X, Y, Z, and I've created it to do X, Y, Z. When the AI is learning from the process, and not just for myself, from all around, from new papers, from new technology, from new documentation, and comes back with some insights, I don't care if they're random or not. It comes with insights that are valuable. I have a hard time to call those insights mine. It's just being truthful. I can't say those insights are mine. And I feel I feel getting myself into trouble if I will go to any kind of body, USPTO or not, or anyone, you as my friend, and say, oh, I created this. I'll be lying to you, because I didn't. So how can I go and follow any other process without actually stating, wait a minute, there is some random machine, absolutely random to a large extent, being influenced by tons of other data. I don't understand the weights. It's so complex, my brain cannot even follow it, even its inner logic, and it came with something out. It's the inventor. I'm not the inventor.
Well, you can have these insights, but you still have to take action, right? Like this, the success is defined as insights plus capital plus execution, right? So you may have these great insights through this AI trainer, this model, but you still have to take action. Do you think that the same ethical considerations still apply?
Actually, that's kind of like interesting. I had this discussion actually before the meeting, and he said, if we follow the money and the AI invents, maybe we don't need the IP office anymore because it doesn't cost money to invent anymore. Invention becomes easy. Anyone here who never necessarily invented a thing except for thought as a kid, as a 7-year-old, I'm going to build a spaceship, can go to, an AI system with whatever other creation says, hey, build me a spaceship. And if you get the spaceship out of it, is it yours? No, the AI created it, it's yours. You can go and then make money out of it, which is great. Sends people to space. The idea that an AI creates for us does not yet mean that it's end all be all. It's a tool. It's a very smart tool. We can claim ownership, but we can't claim the invention itself as ours.
This reminds me of going back to the to the intellectual property clause in the U.S. Constitution. And it basically says that we give these rewards to authors and inventors as incentives for them to create. The purpose is not to reward them in and of itself, not to say, good, you should make money off of this. It's to give them the incentive to do the creation in the first place. So what you're saying is, if AI can do all of the creation, the human doesn't need an incentive for the creation. And that may ultimately be true. Certainly wasn't true when the Constitution was written. And we may have to reconceive what we're trying to protect when we protect innovations and works of authorship. So maybe what we'll end up having, and this was part of our conversation, was to protect the investment to take it to market. Because if you spend a bunch of money doing that and someone of equal size to you just copies it and takes it to market similarly in the next couple of weeks, then you may not spend the money. You didn't spend money to innovate, but you spend money to execute it, and we may have to legislate differently.
I hear you and agreeing with that, and I think the easiest step is to recognize the AI as an inventor as well. And at that point, I can write a patent and protect it for the next 20 years. Otherwise, how do I protect the going to market? It's very fuzzy. It's much easier to protect an invention than protecting a go-to-market. And by the way, the average go-to-market on any technology being created is 20x. If it took you $1 to create a technology, it will take you $20 to take it to market. It's really hard to protect go-to-market.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You had a question as well, so go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Knut Balslev, also with Adventure. I have a question on bias of AI. How you, and this came from Shmuel, from your comment that you may ask the same thing and then you will get a different result, which seems to indicate that the underlying large language models that were used can be interpreted in different ways or weighed in different ways. So what are the ways that exist, or are there ways, or should I ask AI about ways to make a new answer different in a certain direction? Is it possible to create bias in AI models?
So yes, all models are biased in one way or another. They're probabilistic, and that's why you can get different answers if you put the same inputs in. Now, you had kind of two questions there. Are they biased? Yes, and that's something we're constantly worrying about. And bias can be many, many different things, and that's a worry we're always looking at. But by their nature, they are biased in some way. By our nature, we're biased in some way, all of us. The other question is, how, if you don't like what it gave you, how do you correct it? Honestly, the way I do it, and I would split that into two questions. There are two ways to correct it. You can correct it yourself. I speak to AI like a human nowadays. I turn on the audio in my office. I don't even type anymore. I speak to it just like, Tony Stark and Jarvis. And we have conversations all day long. And that's what I have set up in my office. And if it says something I don't like, I treat it like an employee and tell it I don't like it, and it figures it out pretty quick.
Is it voice to voice, or are you
voice to voice?
Okay.
Yeah, it's just faster.
Yeah.
The other way, though, is I was talking earlier to one of these gentlemen about back in the 50s, there was a great book called Cybernetics, and they discovered that one of the key things to life was feedback loops, self-correcting feedback loops, and you can build those now. And you ask the AI to correct itself, and it turns out it's really good at that. Or you use multi-agent frameworks. This is kind of the evolution. These multi-agent frameworks are just going to really just fundamentally change what we already know about AI. They already are, but that's one way they can be used. So, for example, in the book we generated, I have an editor, I have an author agent, an editor agent. I have a language specialist agent, and they talk to each other, and it's fun to watch actually. How they're editing. They pass edits back and forth, recommendations back and forth until something comes out the end. So it doesn't require humans to correct it.
Go ahead.
Ask a question, sorry. A little hard for me to stand. I wanted to ask a question about, I think some of you said, like, it doesn't understand, but aren't we also simply next best word prediction machines, which is arguably worse in some ways? Like, what's the difference between me learning in a class or through a book versus an AI learning through training data and then producing an output? Like, is it really that different? Like, what is
Philosophical.
It's a little philosophical, but someone said it's not it's not like a human, it doesn't understand, but I'm curious, like, what is it? Does it actually not understand? Like, what does that even mean?
I know people have to turn out. I know people may think about it as philosophical. There are plenty of books written on that. There is a professor, I forgot, in the US, I forgot his name, who was written about this interesting loopiness, where you write a sentence that speaks about itself. Does the sentence really understand itself? Like, you all know the sentence, this sentence is a lie. Is it a lie or is it true? I mean, we can't even say. But in general, this is what we are humans. We are reflecting on we reflect on self, and finally we've created now machines that can reflect on self in verbal way. We call them LLMs, and this would really, trigger all of us with regard to: is it me? Is the system is learning? I'm teaching. I'm talking to my machine, and this machine is learning and interacting with me better and better over time. At one point of time, it's my friend. I can ask him a question. He knows a lot of things about myself. And so, is it another co-inventor, or is it not?
So this self-reflective, recursive model you're talking about, that's logical, but humans are more than that. We're also creative, right?
Well, we could call it creative, but where creativity comes from, whatever the trigger is, it ends up with some verbal or non-verbal creativity, whatever it is that comes out. Same thing with the machine. Now we have a lot of randomness within us. There's a lot of randomness within this machine, and we are in a place where when you come with a great idea, I can't say how you came to this great idea, but just looking at you and say, oh, you look amazing, and there's nothing for me to. The same thing with a machine. It can come with a great idea that I do not really know where it came from, except for the randomness in it. Great. So who owns it? The machine or me?
Any more questions? That's actually a good point. Creativity and where does it come from? Obviously, there must be some connection in the brain. In fact, there's a lot of parallels between machine learning and how nodes are constantly updating information and impacting cells around them. Neurons, I should say. And I think that's kind of like the next generation of how these models are being built. And there's I guess biomimicry. It's kind of similar, like learning from nature and then applying that in the lab. Dr. Tim, are you seeing kind of similar trends when you see what's coming next? Or Shmuel, when you read your 5 to 10 papers around AI per day? Or David, is the same question. What are you guys finding? How are we getting inspired by nature?
So it's a great question. I mean, obviously, neural networks initially were inspired after our brain, after the neurons in our brain. Now we're finding all kinds of new ways. We're constantly comparing, how do humans think? What do we have that AI doesn't have yet? It's a good question. I don't know that we know. There's a lot of work right now around causal analysis. Do we understand the entire causal models that might help improve them? But emotional, we were just talking, that was a fantastic question. We were just talking about what does it mean to understand humans? I think David asked the right question. What does that even mean to understand language? Because we are way beyond ordered, predicting the next best word. We're using contextual, locational, emotional analysis. I saw a paper come out a month or so ago, I believe, demonstrating an AI that could understand the emotional reaction of a human, predict the emotional reaction of a human to a set of circumstances better than another human could. So we might say it understands things differently than us, but the outcome, is it the outcome or the understanding that matters? So that's why I said it's a fascinating question about what do we understand or what does it actually understand?
Peter, I'll call on you in a second. If I could just go back to, I'm the lawyer in the room, right? And a lot of these are philosophical questions. Back to the title of the seminar, IP in the age of AI. IP has typically, it's going to be a bit of an oversimplification, but it has typically tracked ownership with authorship or inventorship. You didn't own the invention unless you invented it. You didn't own the work of authorship unless you wrote it. Okay? As we move into a world where AI authors or invents, or partly authors or invents, and we can't draw the line, we may need to recast IP ownership in terms of other things than authorship or inventorship. It may need to be who wrote the AI, or who operated the AI, or who invested the money to train and improve the AI to the point where it would author or invent. You can use different criteria. We have a current structure and a bunch of court decisions and legislation that currently rests mostly on this concept of ownership follows authorship or inventorship. But that could all be redone. Peter, you wanted to add something?
Well, I thought you were going to say this, David, but I think you would agree with me that in the United States, we conceive of the intellectual property system as utilitarian, as a means to an end, promoting progress. And it's a very monolithic system, 20 years for patents, life plus 70 for copyrights. And I think the AI era is causing us to think that we need to differentiate better. Because even though I agree with what Shmuel said, I also think that 20 years is kind of random when you think about that. So let's look at the use case of drug discovery. Drug discovery, as we know from a lot of case studies, is very much just the beginning of a process that leads to human clinical trials, because we want to have ethical human experimentation. And it's in the clinical trial phase that the highest costs are expended. The upfront drug discovery, which becomes the patented product or composition of matter, is really just getting you started down this clinical trial path. And since we don't have, and I'll come back to Shmuel's other example, if we had a perfect simulation of the human body, we wouldn't need human clinical trials. But that truly is way in the future science fiction. We're getting closer with protein folding and things, but it's still very personalized and very individual. So what we want to do is have a system that was able to still enable even an AI-discovered drug to be able to monetize enough to justify the human clinical trial. And that's just one example. We could go into art, we can go into music, we can go into a whole bunch of use cases. But it just seems that our intellectual property system is in need of reinvention.
We're pretty much at time here. We want to also give another shout out to our sponsors, to TriNet, Comerica, Vistra. Round of applause for these guys. Of course, we want to be valuable. The zombie audience wants to be valuable to you guys as well. So let's maybe take a moment or so to plug a website or how folks can get in touch with you. Tim, please.
Well, I think the easiest way to get in touch with me is through advanry.co. And we have a fantastic team there, a multidisciplinary team that can help with AI in a number of different areas to get some of these innovations to market. So I'm very excited to work with them.
Same here, advantari.co. If you truly want to create high quality IP portfolio that protects your business, talk to Advantari.
Our website is fenwick.com. You just go on that website, there's up at the top, there's a little people button you push and you type in Hayes and my bio will come up with all my contact information.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, gentlemen, for some delicious grades here. SiliconZombies.com. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks again, everybody. Cheers.
Without you in my world, I need you.
Send me some questions.
I like that ball of light. It's like a ball of fire.
The problem is like anything is when we close it.
Guide my mind.
Just stop and stream will be saved.
Yeah.